The notification popped up on my laptop. Living room camera, motion detected. I smiled, thinking it was Alex, home early from his business trip to surprise me. I clicked the live feed, my heart doing a little flip, ready to see his familiar smile. But it wasn't his smile I saw. It was his hands, tangled in the hair of my best friend, Chloe. They were on our couch. The gray velvet one I'd spent 3 months saving for. Her laugh, a sound I had loved my whole life, echoed through my laptop speakers, tinny and cruel. The world went silent. The air in my home office turned thick and cold, like I'd been plunged into icy water. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared at the screen, watching the two most important people in my life destroy me in real time, in the home I had so carefully built. I watched for a full minute, my mind refusing to process it. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. That couldn't be Alex, the man who left little notes in my lunch bag. That couldn't be Chloe, the woman who held my hand when my mother passed away. But it was. My finger, numb and trembling, moved to the trackpad. I took a screenshot, then another. I didn't know why. It was just an instinct, a desperate need to have proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that this nightmare was real. Then I closed the laptop. The sudden silence was deafening. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like hammer blows, one tick for Alex, one for Chloe, a rhythm counting down the end of my life as I knew it. He was supposed to be 2 states away. She was supposed to be at a yoga retreat. They had coordinated their lies. The thought was so clinical, so deliberate, it cut through the shock and hit me with a pain so sharp it made me gasp. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked out of my office and into the hallway. Everything looked the same but felt alien. The photos on the wall of the 3 of us, at the beach, at my birthday, at their graduation, mocked me. Every smiling face was a lie. I walked to the front door, opened it, and walked out. I didn't take my purse, my phone, or my keys. I just walked. The cool evening air did nothing to stop the fire burning under my skin. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that house, breathing the air they had contaminated. I ended up at a small park a few blocks away. I sat on a cold, empty bench and watched the cars go by, their headlights streaking past like ghosts. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my shattered pieces together. I didn't cry. I was too far gone for tears. I was in a place beyond sadness, a hollowed-out cavern of betrayal. Hours passed. The sky turned from bruised purple to inky black. A light rain began to fall, plastering my hair to my face, but I barely felt it. I was thinking about a little wooden bird Alex had given me on our first anniversary. He'd carved it himself. "For our nest," he'd whispered, placing it in my palm. It sat on the mantelpiece in our living room. It was probably watching them. A silent, wooden witness to my humiliation. I wondered if he even remembered giving it to me. I wondered if he'd carved one for her, too. That night, the house was empty when I finally forced myself to go back. It was pristine, quiet. No sign of them, except for a faint trace of her perfume in the air. A scent I'd bought her for her last birthday. I went into the bathroom and threw up. The next few days were a blur of numb choreography. I called in sick to work. I didn't answer my phone, which buzzed incessantly with texts from both of them. "Where are you?" from Alex. "Are you okay? I'm worried," from Chloe. The hypocrisy was so staggering it felt like a physical blow. I moved through the condo like a ghost. Their ghosts were everywhere. In the coffee mug he used every morning. In the book she'd left on the nightstand. I gathered every trace of them, every photo, every gift, every piece of clothing, and packed them into black trash bags. It felt less like cleaning and more like an exorcism. When I got to the wooden bird on the mantel, I hesitated. My fingers traced its smooth, simple lines. This little object had meant the world to me. It had symbolized safety, love, a future. Now it was just a piece of wood, a monument to a lie. I dropped it into the bag with the rest of the debris. 2 weeks after, I still hadn't spoken to them. I'd sent Alex a single text. "I know, get your things out of the condo by Friday. Leave your key." He'd tried to call 100 times. He left rambling, desperate voicemails. It wasn't an accident, he said. He was confused. He loved me. It was all a terrible mistake. He never once mentioned Chloe's name, as if omitting her would somehow erase half of the betrayal. Chloe's texts were even worse. They were filled with feigned innocence and concern. "Brooke, Please talk to me. What's going on? I feel like I'm losing my sister. My sister? The word made me want to smash my phone against the wall. She wasn't my sister. She was a viper I had welcomed into my home, and she had poisoned everything. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered so much it felt like I was suffocating. The loneliness was a physical weight. I had lost my partner and my best friend in one devastating blow. The two pillars of my life were gone, and I was left standing in the rubble, completely and utterly alone. My world, once so full of laughter and plans, had shrunk to the four walls of this condo. The silence was my only companion. I'd find myself standing in the middle of the living room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, just to hear a sound that wasn't the echo of my own broken heart. I started to question everything. Every memory was now suspect. Was he looking at her during our anniversary dinner? Was her advice about our relationship just a way to gather information, to find the cracks she could slip through? The gaslighting wasn't just in the present. It was retroactive, reaching back and tainting years of my life. I felt like a fool, a blind, trusting fool. The day Alex came to get his things, I wasn't there. I couldn't be. I sat in a coffee shop miles away, stirring a cold cup of tea for hours, imagining him walking through our home for the last time. When I finally returned, the condo felt emptier, but cleaner. He had taken his clothes, his books, his half of the life we built. He had left his key on the kitchen counter. Next to it was a note, just 3 words. I am so sorry. No explanation, no accountability, just a coward's apology. He also left the wooden bird. It was sitting right in the middle of the counter, separate from the key. He'd taken it out of the trash bag. The gesture was meant to be sentimental, I suppose. A reminder of the good times. But all it did was prove he had no idea of the depths of his betrayal. He thought a little wooden trinket could somehow bridge the chasm he had created. I picked it up, its familiar weight feeling foreign in my hand. I walked to the trash can and dropped it in, the clatter echoing in the silent kitchen. This time, it would stay there. The isolation deepened. Our mutual friends were caught in the middle. They would send cautious texts. Thinking of you, or let me know if you need anything. But the invitations to dinners and parties stopped. It was too awkward. No one knew what to say. I was the odd one out, the single, heartbroken woman they had to handle with care. It was easier to just stay home. One rainy Saturday, about a month after it all happened, I ran out of milk. I forced myself to walk to the little market down the street. As I rounded the corner, I saw them, Alex and Chloe. They were walking hand in hand, laughing at something he'd said. They looked so normal, so happy, like a real couple, starting their life together. They were walking towards our favorite brunch spot, the one I had introduced him to. The one where he had first told me he loved me. They hadn't seen me. I ducked behind a parked car, my heart hammering against my ribs. I watched as Alex leaned down and kissed her, a casual, intimate gesture that belonged to me. The world tilted on its axis. They weren't hiding. They weren't ashamed. They were flaunting it. They had taken my life, and now they were living it out in the open for everyone to see. I felt a humiliation so profound it stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't just that they betrayed me. It was that they had erased me. It was like I had never existed. My love, my friendship, our shared history, it was all disposable. I slid down, crouching behind the car, my back pressed against the cold, wet tire. The rain started coming down harder, but I didn't move. I stayed there until they were long gone, until the street was empty. That's when I realized the worst part of being betrayed by 2 people at once. It's not just the heartbreak or the anger. It's the profound, crushing loneliness. There's no one to call. No one to cry with who truly understands the scope of what you've lost. The person you would normally turn to for comfort is the person who inflicted the wound. And the other person is holding their hand. You are an island, and the water is rising. I finally stood up, drenched and shivering. I didn't go to the market. I walked home, the empty milk carton in my fridge seeming like a fitting symbol for my life. Depleted, empty, useless. Back in the condo, I sank onto the couch. The same couch from the video. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. It was too expensive, too new, but now it felt tainted. I stared at the blank television screen, seeing their reflection instead of my own. For weeks, I was adrift in that sea of loneliness. I functioned, but I wasn't living. I worked from home, ordered groceries online, and spoke to no one but the delivery drivers. The condo was my sanctuary and my prison. I was safe from seeing them, but I was trapped with my own thoughts, which circled endlessly around the same painful questions. Why? What did she have that I didn't? Was any of it ever real? I lost weight. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up from nightmares where I could hear them laughing, just outside my bedroom door. The emotional toll was becoming a physical one. I saw my reflection one morning and barely recognized the pale, gaunt woman staring back at me. Her eyes were hollow, defeated. I was letting them destroy me long after they had walked out the door. They were out there, building a new life on the ashes of mine, while I was here, choking on the smoke. The injustice of it all was a slow, burning poison. He had betrayed my trust. She had betrayed my soul, and I was the one paying the price. I remember one night, sitting on the floor of my closet, surrounded by the ghosts of my old life. The dress I wore on my first date with him. The scarf she'd knitted for me one Christmas. I was drowning in memories, each one a fresh wave of pain. I pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible, as if I could physically shrink away from the agony. I cried for hours. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but silent, exhausted tears that dripped from my chin onto my knees. I cried for the woman I used to be, happy, trusting, naive. I cried for the future I had lost, the marriage, the family, the life I had so carefully planned. And I cried because, in that moment, I truly believed I would never be whole again. It was in that closet, at the absolute lowest point of my life, that a tiny flicker of something else ignited. It wasn't hope. It was anger. A cold, quiet anger that started in the pit of my stomach, an anger at their audacity, at their carelessness, at their utter lack of remorse. They thought they had won. They thought I was a casualty, a sad story they would one day tell with a shake of their heads. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my grief for weakness. I stood up, wiping the tears from my face with the back of my hand. I walked out of the closet and into the sterile quiet of the condo. My eyes landed on a stack of mail on the kitchen counter. Bills, junk mail, and a thick envelope from the bank regarding the mortgage. I had been ignoring it all, but now I picked it up. I slid it open with my thumb. Inside was a statement and various other official documents. My gaze scanned the familiar jargon until it landed on our names, Brooke Miller and Alex Vance. I remembered the day we signed these papers. I was so meticulous, reading every single line. Alex had gotten impatient. "Brooke, can we just sign it? I trust them," he'd said, gesturing to the lawyer. But I hadn't. I never blindly trusted paperwork. I'd insisted on a few minor clauses, things the lawyer called standard but rarely invoked. One was about signatory authority in the event of a partnership dissolution. My father had been a lawyer, and his voice was a constant echo in my head. Protect yourself, always. At the time, I thought it was just due diligence, a formality. I never, in a million years, thought I would need it. I smoothed the paper out on the counter, my fingers tracing the dense legal text. The words, once so dry and boring, now seemed to shimmer with a strange new light. It wasn't about love or trust or friendship anymore. Those things were gone, turned to ash. This was about something else, something cold and hard and binding. That's when I realized they hadn't just broken my heart, they had broken a contract. The papers felt cool and heavy in my hands, a stark contrast to the burning anger in my chest. For the first time in a month, I wasn't just reacting. I was reading. My father's voice echoed in my memory, a calm and steady presence from years ago, back when I was buying my first car. "Read everything, Brooke, especially the fine print. People only tell you what they want you to hear. The paper tells you the truth." That night, I didn't sleep. I made a pot of coffee and spread the mortgage documents across the dining room table. I read every line, every clause, every addendum. My own handwriting from 2 years prior looked back at me from the signature lines. It was the handwriting of a different woman, one who believed in forever. There it was. Addendum C, paragraph 4. The clause I'd insisted on. Alex had rolled his eyes, sighing with theatrical impatience while I'd had the lawyer draft it. It stipulated that in the event of a partnership dissolution, a formal buyout offer must be made. If the offer wasn't accepted or matched within 90 days, the primary signatory, the one who provided over 70% of the down payment, retained the right to initiate a private sale to a third party of their choosing. I was the primary signatory. I had used the inheritance my mother left me for that down payment. It was my foundation, the bedrock on which we were supposed to build our life. Alex had contributed what he could, but it was my money that had made this home a reality. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. He had called me paranoid for insisting on that clause. "We're not a business, Brooke," he'd said. "We're a team." It turned out we were a business after all. And his partner had been staging a hostile takeover with my best friend. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I got dressed in proper work clothes. I put on makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time since that horrible day, I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman with a contract. I found the business card of a lawyer my father had always respected. A man named Mr. Harrison. I called his office, my voice steadier than I expected, and made an appointment for the following day. Walking into his quiet, wood-paneled office felt like stepping into another world, a world governed by logic and rules, not by messy, painful emotions. Mr. Harrison was an older man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He listened patiently, without interruption, as I laid out the whole sordid story. I didn't cry. I presented the facts as clearly as I could, my voice low and even. I pushed the mortgage documents and the screenshots from the security camera across his large mahogany desk. He looked at the photos first, his expression unreadable. Then he spent a long time reading Addendum C. Silence hung between us, thick and heavy. The only sound was the rustle of paper and the distant city traffic. Finally, he looked up at me over the rim of his glasses. "Your father taught you well, Miss Miller," he said, his voice gentle. "This is an exceptionally well-drafted clause. It gives you considerable leverage." Leverage, the word felt powerful. It was the opposite of the helplessness that had been suffocating me. "So what are my options?" I asked. "Legally," he began, leaning back in his chair, "you can force a sale. We issue a formal buyout offer to Mr. Vance for your half of the equity. Based on what you've told me about his finances, he won't be able to afford it. Once he defaults on that offer, you are free to sell your share. And because it's a private sale, you can sell it to whomever you wish, for whatever price you deem appropriate." "To whomever I wish," I repeated slowly. The words sparked an idea. It was a wild, audacious thought, but it took root instantly. A memory surfaced. Chloe, a year or so ago, complaining over a glass of wine about her ex-boyfriend, Mark. "He was just so meticulous," she'd said, sneering. "He wanted to know where every dollar went. He questioned everything, so suffocating." At the time, I had nodded in sympathy. Now I saw it differently. Meticulous, questioned everything. Maybe Mark wasn't suffocating. Maybe he was just smart. Maybe he'd seen a side of Chloe that I had been blind to. "Mr. Harrison," I said, leaning forward, "does this third party have to be a stranger?" He raised an eyebrow. "No. It can be anyone you choose, as long as they can legally enter into a contract." The plan began to form, not out of rage, but out of a cold, clear sense of poetic justice. It wasn't enough to just take the condo away from Alex. That was simple. That was just a breakup. This had to be different. This had to be a consequence tailored specifically to them. What would hurt Chloe more than anything? Losing the prize she had stolen, seeing it in the hands of the man she had discarded. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. It took me less than 10 minutes to find Mark. His social media profile was sparse, private, but his profile picture was recent. He looked older, more serious than I remembered, but there was a quiet dignity in his expression. I hesitated for a long time, my finger hovering over the message button. This was the point of no return. Was I really going to do this? Drag a stranger into my mess? Then I thought of them, laughing, hand in hand, walking into our brunch spot. I thought of Chloe's fake, concerned texts. I thought of the wooden bird in the trash. My resolve hardened. This wasn't just my mess. It was a mess they had made, and it was time they helped clean it up. I typed a short, carefully worded message. "Mark, my name is Brooke Miller. I was a close friend of Chloe's. I know this is out of the blue, but I have a business proposition you might find interesting. It concerns a shared acquaintance and a piece of property. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet." I hit send before I could second-guess myself again. For 2 days, there was no reply. I started to think he had ignored it, deleted it as spam from a crazy ex-girlfriend's friend. I felt a pang of foolishness. But then, on the third morning, a notification appeared. "Okay," it read. "Where and when?" We met at a sterile, anonymous coffee shop halfway between our two offices. I got there early, my stomach churning with nerves. I had rehearsed what I was going to say, but now it all felt theatrical and insane. He walked in and I recognized him immediately. He was taller than I remembered. He moved with a kind of weary caution, as if he expected the world to disappoint him. "Brooke," he asked, his voice quiet. "Mark. Thanks for coming," I said, motioning to the chair opposite me. The small talk was awkward, painful. We were two strangers connected only by a shared wound. I decided to cut through it. "I'm not going to waste your time," I said, opening my laptop. "I think it's better if I just show you." I turned the screen towards him and played the video from the camera. I didn't watch it again. I watched his face. His expression didn't change much. There was no shock, no gasp, just a slow, tired tightening of his jaw. He watched the entire minute of footage in silence. When it was over, he just nodded slowly. "Yeah," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "That looks about right." He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of empathy in his eyes. He wasn't surprised by what Chloe did. He was just sorry it had happened to me, too. "She told me you were controlling," I said quietly. A sad, humorless smile touched his lips. "And she told me you were a sweet, naive girl who was a bit of a doormat. Looks like she knew how to play both sides." The confirmation hit me harder than I expected. Chloe hadn't just betrayed me. She had been actively managing my reputation, painting me as weak to others, ensuring I would be isolated if her schemes ever came to light. I took a deep breath and laid out the rest of it. I explained the condo, the down payment, the brilliant cruelty of Addendum C, paragraph 4. I explained my legal position, and then I told him my idea. "Alex can't afford to buy me out," I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Harrison will serve him the papers next week. He'll have 90 days to respond. When he doesn't, I have the right to sell my half. I want to sell it to you." Mark stared at me, his coffee untouched. "You want to sell me your half of a condo you co-own with the guy who is sleeping with my ex-girlfriend?" "Yes," I said, "for $1. He blinked. $1. $1 and you cover the legal fees. The equity is yours, all of it, my mother's inheritance. The money I poured into it for 2 years. I don't want it. I don't want their money. I want a clean slate. And I want them to understand that actions have consequences." He was silent for a long time, studying my face. He was looking for the catch, looking for the angle. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Because Chloe underestimated you," I said simply. "And she underestimated me. I think that gives us something in common. She thinks she's one. She thinks she's moving into my home, my life. I want her to open the door one day and find you on the other side of it. I want her to realize the man she called suffocating now holds the keys to her new life." A slow, genuine smile finally spread across his face. It transformed him. The weariness lifted for a moment, replaced by a glint of something I recognized in myself. It was the quiet, determined spark of someone who had been pushed too far. "Brooke," he said, leaning forward and extending his hand across the table. "You have yourself a business partner." The next 3 months were a masterclass in quiet discipline. I moved out of the master bedroom and into the guest room. I started packing my personal belongings, the truly sentimental things, into boxes and putting them in storage. I was systematically erasing myself from the home we had shared. Mr. Harrison served Alex the papers at his office. I got a string of frantic, furious voicemails that night. "Brooke, what the hell is this? A buyout? Are you insane? I can't afford this. We need to talk." I didn't answer. I let my lawyer do the talking. Every communication was cold, formal, and on paper. Chloe tried to intervene, sending me long, saccharine emails about forgiveness and friendship, and how we were letting a silly mistake ruin everything. She positioned herself as the mature, benevolent peacemaker, trying to fix the mess her boyfriend's crazy ex was making. I saved every email. During that 90-day period, I worked on myself. I started running in the mornings, the physical exhaustion a welcome relief from the mental turmoil. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had been mine long before Alex or Chloe came into the picture. I started to build a new life, brick by brick, outside the shadow of my old one. One of the biggest steps was getting rid of the couch, the gray velvet monument to my humiliation. I didn't sell it. I called a charity and had them haul it away for free. The day it left, the living room felt huge, empty, and full of possibility. I bought a new one, a simple, comfortable sofa in a deep blue. It was mine, no memories attached. I even saw them once from a distance, looking at rings in a jewelry store window. They looked so happy, so certain of their future. They had no idea their entire foundation was about to crumble. They assumed I would eventually break, that I would have to sell the condo on the open market. They thought the worst that could happen was they'd have to move and split the profits with me. They thought this was about money. The 90 days came and went. Alex, as expected, couldn't produce the funds. The default notice was issued. The final phase of the plan could now begin. Mark and I met at Mr. Harrison's office to sign the final papers. We were efficient, professional. There was a quiet understanding between us. We weren't friends. We were allies bound by a common cause. As I signed my name on the deed transfer, my hand didn't shake. I felt a profound sense of calm. I was letting go of the property, the money, the life I thought I wanted. But I was gaining something far more valuable: my self-respect. Mr. Harrison notarized the documents with a heavy stamp. It was done. Mark was now the legal co-owner of the condo, Alex's new roommate. I handed Mark the spare key I'd made. Our eyes met. "He changed the locks on the front door last week," I said. "He thinks that will keep me out." "That's fine," Mark said, pocketing the key. "A locksmith is more effective than a restraining order anyway, and much quieter." We walked out of the office building and into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight that had been pressing down on me was gone. "What now?" Mark asked. "Now," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "We let the mailman deliver the good news." That's when I realized the key Alex thought he controlled, the one to the front door, was just a piece of metal. I had the real key, the one that unlocked a future he and Chloe never saw coming. The signed and notarized documents were sent by courier. The official notice, informing Alex of the transfer of ownership, was sent by certified mail. There was a quiet, clinical precision to it all. No drama. Just the slow, inexorable turning of bureaucratic wheels. I spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended animation. I had moved into a small, clean apartment across town a week before the 90 days were up. It was sparse, furnished with only a bed, a desk, and my new blue couch. But it was mine. The air was clean. There were no ghosts here. I worked. I ran. I called my dad. I lived a life of deliberate, peaceful monotony. I didn't check my phone for their messages. I didn't look at their social media. I was a ship that had untied itself from the dock, and I was content to simply drift in the quiet water for a while. The storm broke on a Wednesday afternoon. My phone, which had been silent on my kitchen counter, began to vibrate. It was Alex. I watched it buzz, the screen lighting up with his name, a name that now felt like a relic from another lifetime. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. And again, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Then the text started. A rapid-fire barrage of pure, unfiltered panic. "What is this legal notice? Transfer of ownership, to who? This is a mistake, right? Call me. Brooke, call me right now. Who the hell is Mark, JNNINGS?" I read that last text and a slow, cold calm washed over me. The mail had arrived. I picked up the phone, my hand steady. I didn't call him back. I texted Mark. "He knows," I wrote. The reply came a minute later. "Understood, I'll be there in an hour. The locksmith is meeting me." Then I turned my phone on silent and put it in a drawer. His chaos was not my responsibility anymore. It was his and Chloe's and Mark's. I had simply set the stage and handed them the script. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my blue couch, looking out the window at the rain that had just started to fall. I imagined the scene playing out in the condo. Alex pacing back and forth, the legal papers shaking in his hand. Chloe, her face a mask of confusion, asking what was wrong. The slow, dawning horror as they realized what I had done. They had assumed I would fight them on their terms, with tears, with shouting, with emotional appeals. They never imagined I would fight them on mine, with contracts, with clauses, with consequences. An hour later, my phone, still in the drawer, began to buzz with a different number. Chloe. Her name on the screen sent a jolt through me, a phantom pain from a wound that was finally starting to scar over. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I declined it. Then her text started. They were a masterclass in manipulation, a perfect reflection of the woman I now knew her to be. "Brooke, Alex is freaking out. I think there's been some horrible legal mix-up. We need to fix this together. This isn't you. This is vindictive and crazy. Are you listening to some terrible lawyer? Don't let them turn you into this. After everything we've been through, I was your maid of honor. How could you do this to me?" To me, asterisk not to us, to asterisk me. In the end, it was always about her. Her prize, her victory, her perfect new life being threatened. I didn't reply. My silence was a wall she could not climb. The sun was beginning to set when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." "It's done," Mark's voice said. He sounded tired but calm. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Tell me everything," I said quietly. "I met the locksmith at the front door," he began, his voice a low monotone, like a detective giving a report. "He had the lock changed in about 20 minutes. The whole time I could hear them inside. Arguing. His voice was loud, hers was sharp. He paused. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. I used my new key, opened the door, and walked in. They were in the living room. It was exactly like you'd imagine. He was holding the papers. She was crying. The moment they saw me, they just stopped. Froze. I closed my eyes, picturing it. The big, empty space where the gray couch used to be. The confused, guilty look on their faces turning to pure, unadulterated shock. Alex just stared at me. He looked between me and the legal papers like his brain couldn't connect the two. He said, "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" I didn't say anything at first. Mark continued. "I just took out my copy of the deed transfer and my ID and placed them on the coffee table." I said, "Actually, according to this, it's my house too. I'm Mark Jennings, your new roommate." Silence. I could almost hear the echo of those words in the condo. He went pale, Brooke, I mean sheet white, but Chloe, her reaction was different. It wasn't just shock, it was recognition. And then it was absolute horror. "What did she do?" I whispered. She looked at me, and it was like she was seeing a ghost from a past she thought she'd buried. She just kept shaking her head, whispering, "No. No, it can't be." Then Alex finally put it together. He looked at her, then at me, and this look of dawning comprehension came over his face. He said her name. "Chloe, you know him." Mark let out a dry, humorless laugh. That was the best part, that single moment. He wasn't mad at you anymore, or at me. He was mad at asterisk her. He was realizing that this wasn't just about you getting revenge on him. This was about her past catching up with her. The web wasn't just between the three of you anymore. It was bigger. And she was the spider at the center of it. I leaned my head back against the wall. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was a strange, hollow sense of balance. The scales, so violently tipped, were finally leveling out. "They started arguing then," Mark said, forgetting I was even there. He was yelling, "You told me he was a crazy ex. You told me he was nothing." And she was crying, saying she didn't know, that you must have found me, that you were trying to ruin their lives. He paused again. I let them go on for a few minutes, then I cleared my throat. They both stopped and looked at me, like they'd forgotten about the main problem, the one who now legally owned half their home. "I told them the arrangement was simple," he said, his voice turning firm. "I would be taking the master bedroom, as per my rights as a co-owner with equal claim. They could have the guest room. I told them I expected my half of the utility bills on the 1st of every month. And I told them that any of Chloe's belongings found in the common areas would be placed in a trash bag on the front step." I was speechless. It was more brutal, more clinical, more perfect than anything I could have orchestrated. "Alex, he just deflated," Mark finished. All the fight went out of him. He sank onto the floor. Chloe just stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking at me with the most profound hatred I have ever seen. It was the same look she gave me the day I found out she'd drained our joint savings account. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "they have two choices. They can live with me under my rules, or they can sell. If they sell, they have to buy me out at fair market value. Which means, after the mortgage is paid off, the remaining equity gets split. I get my half, and you get yours." I sat up straight. "What? No, Mark, that was our deal. The equity is yours. Our deal was that you'd sign it over to me for $1. You did. It's legally mine," he said calmly. "And I'm legally entitled to transfer half of whatever equity I receive back to the person who made it possible. A finder's fee, if you will. "The papers are already with Mr. Harrison. Check your email." I didn't know what to say. I had wanted nothing. I had been willing to walk away with nothing just to have peace. "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "Because Chloe was right about one thing," he said, and I could hear the faint trace of a smile in his voice. "I am meticulous. I like balanced books. And leaving you with nothing for what was rightfully yours, that just doesn't sit right with me. You didn't do this for the money, Brooke, which is exactly why you deserve it." We were silent for a moment. Two strangers, bound by a bizarre and painful circumstance, who had somehow managed to find a strange sort of justice together. "Thank you, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Don't thank me," he replied. "We both know who did all the work. Enjoy your evening. I think I'm going to order a pizza and watch a movie in my new living room." He hung up. I sat in the quiet of my new apartment, the rain tapping gently against the window pane. I didn't check my email. I didn't need to. That's when I realized that true justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. It's not about what you take from someone, but what you manage to get back for yourself. And it turned out I had gotten back more than just my self-respect. The aftermath was a slow, messy unraveling that I watched from a safe distance. Mutual friends started calling, their voices a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity. Apparently, Alex and Chloe's story was that I had gone insane with jealousy and sold the condo to a random stranger, just to spite them. But the details didn't add up. When they learned the random stranger was Chloe's ex, the one she had always painted as a villain, the story began to shift. People started looking at her differently. The careful narrative she had built for herself, the one of the loyal friend caught in a tragic romance, crumbled. They didn't last a week living with Mark. His presence in the condo was a constant, quiet indictment of them both. He didn't have to say a word. His key in the lock, his coffee mug in the sink, his car in the parking spot, every mundane detail of his existence was a reminder of their shared deceit. They moved out on a Saturday into a small, cramped apartment they could barely afford. The condo was put on the market. 2 months later, it sold. I met Mr. Harrison to sign the final closing documents. He slid a check across the polished mahogany desk. It was for my mother's inheritance, plus my share of the equity. Every dollar I had put in, and then some. I looked at the check, at the clean, printed numbers. It felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. The money had never been the point. The last I heard, Alex and Chloe were struggling. Their relationship, born of secrecy and excitement, couldn't survive the harsh, ugly light of reality. The thrill was gone. All that was left were two deeply flawed people who had built their foundation on a lie and now had to live with the consequences of it. There was no beautiful condo, no comfortable life stolen from me. There was just a cheap apartment, mounting bills, and the lingering mistrust that always exists between two people who know, with absolute certainty, that their partner is capable of profound betrayal. I never saw either of them again. I never received an apology. I realized eventually that I didn't need one. An apology would have been their attempt to find closure, but I had already found my own. One afternoon, a few months after everything was settled, I was cleaning out an old box of files and I found a photo. It was of me and Chloe, years ago, on a trip to the coast. We were young, smiling, our arms thrown around each other. For a long moment, I felt a pang of the old grief, a sadness for the friend I had loved and lost. I remembered the person she used to be, or at least the person I thought she was. I wondered if she ever regretted it, not getting caught, but the betrayal itself. I hoped she did, not for my sake, but for hers. I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I put it back in the box. It wasn't my life anymore. It was just a picture. I stopped waiting for their apology. Peace was mine to give to myself. Respect can't be bought or stolen, it can only be earned. And in the quiet dignity of my new life, I had finally earned my own. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe. More true-to-life tales of courage, family, and quiet revenge await here. Thank you for listening.